There are moments in science when a discovery feels less like progress and more like a warning. This may be one of them. For decades, Voyager 1 has traveled farther into the dark than any human-made object ever has, carrying with it the last faint voice of Earth into a region of space no human being will ever reach. Most people assumed that, in the end, Voyager's story would be simple: a slow fade, a weakening signal, and eventually, silence. But its final strange transmission may have changed that forever. Because when researchers fed the distorted data into Majorana 1, something impossible began to emerge. Hidden beneath the noise was not random corruption, not mechanical decay, and not the dying chaos of an old spacecraft. It was structure, it was logic. It was a message buried so deeply inside Voyager's signal that no classical system could fully expose it. And once that discovery was connected to Voyager 1's encounter with a highly advanced object in deep space, the implications became deeply disturbing. What if Voyager 1 did not simply send us its last signal? What if it delivered something back to Earth that was never ours? At first, the signal felt familiar in the worst possible way. Engineers know what failing systems look like. They know the signature of damaged telemetry, decaying hardware, weak transmission integrity, and the ugly distortions that come from a spacecraft stretched far beyond its intended lifespan. And Voyager 1, after nearly 50 years in space, had every reason to sound broken. That is why the strange transmission did not immediately trigger panic. It looked like the kind of chaos you would expect from a machine that has survived too long in too much darkness. But the deeper researchers looked, the less random that chaos became. Patterns started appearing inside the corruption. Timing intervals repeated with unnatural consistency. Clusters of distortion lined up in ways that did not resemble hardware collapse. Instead of disintegrating into meaningless noise, parts of the signal seemed to preserve a hidden internal order. It was like looking at a torn page and realizing the fragments still form a sentence if placed in the right sequence. That is the moment the story changed. Because once the transmission stopped looking broken and started looking buried, the possibility of a hidden message moved from speculation to something much darker. Voyager 1 may not have been malfunctioning at all. It may have been carrying a signal disguised as failure. This is where Majorana 1 enters the story like a key sliding into a lock no one even knew existed. Traditional analysis systems were powerful, but they treated the distortion the way scientists usually treat corrupted transmissions: something to clean, filter, reduce, or discard. Majorana 1 approached it differently. Instead of assuming the noise was meaningless, it searched for relationships inside the noise itself, looking for hidden logic spread across layers too complex for classical systems to hold together at once. And that is when everything became unsettling. Because the chip did not just uncover one pattern, it uncovered several, nested inside one another. Prime number spacing, structured progressions, repeating symbolic relationships that felt less like residue and more like intention. The deeper the signal was processed, the more it resembled something designed to survive concealment. Not a message written clearly across the transmission, but a message folded into it, as if the sender expected it would have to wait years, maybe decades, before the right kind of mind could finally extract it. That changes the emotional weight of the discovery completely. We are no longer talking about clever signal recovery. We are talking about the possibility that the transmission was meant to remain unreadable until humanity built the exact kind of technology capable of unlocking it, and Majorana 1 may have been that technology. What makes the decoded transmission even more disturbing is that it does not exist in isolation. Voyager 1 had already passed through one of the strangest episodes of its entire mission, an encounter in deep space involving behavior, signal patterns, and observational clues that pointed toward the presence of a highly advanced object. On its own, that would already be one of the most unsettling stories in modern space exploration. But once the hidden message was decoded, those events stopped feeling separate. They started feeling connected. That is the terrifying implication here. Voyager may not have simply captured strange data after meeting something unknown. It may have become part of the exchange itself. The object did not need to wave, shout, or send a dramatic beam across space. It may have done something far more sophisticated. It may have used Voyager's own outgoing systems as the carrier, inserting or reshaping a transmission inside the spacecraft's signal in a way that looked like corruption until the right decoder came along. Think about how unsettling that really is. Voyager 1 may have encountered a highly advanced object, received a structured response, and then carried that response all the way back toward Earth inside what everyone first assumed was meaningless distortion. Like hearing your own radio crackle in the dark, and suddenly realizing another voice has been hiding inside it the whole time. Humanity may have already received the message before it even understood there was one. One of the strongest reasons this discovery feels so disturbing is simple. Voyager 1 is not capable of inventing what Majorana 1 found. Voyager is a marvel of engineering, but it is also a machine from another era. It was not built with adaptive intelligence, advanced symbolic processing, or any architecture remotely capable of generating evolving mathematical sequences that behave like a layered communication protocol. It cannot suddenly become creative. It cannot spontaneously write new physics into its own signal, and it certainly cannot construct a transmission that only yields its deepest meaning under quantum-style analysis. That is why the decoded patterns feel so impossible. Buried inside the transmission were relationships that looked less like telemetry and more like design structure, almost as if the signal carried an external logic alien to the spacecraft itself. And once that becomes clear, the list of explanations gets very short and very uncomfortable. Either something impossible happened inside Voyager's systems for no known reason, or something outside Voyager placed the structure there. That is the point where this stops being a curious anomaly and starts becoming a genuine deep space mystery. Because if the message did not come from Voyager, then the next question is unavoidable. What did? One of the most unsettling features of the decoded transmission is that it did not reveal itself all at once. It opened gradually, almost like it had layers meant to be passed through in sequence. First came recognizable mathematical order. Then came deeper structural alignments. Then came symbolic relationships that felt less like simple data and more like an organized progression, as though the signal were teaching the decoder how to keep reading. That matters because random interference does not behave like that. Noise does not patiently unfold. Malfunctions do not escalate from basic patterns into increasingly coherent forms. But this transmission appeared to do exactly that. It was almost as if the message had been engineered to begin with universal logic, the kind of thing any sufficiently advanced intelligence might recognize, and only then move into more difficult territory once the receiver proved capable of following. That changes the meaning of the signal in a profound way. It may not have been hidden merely to avoid detection. It may have been hidden so that only a civilization advanced enough to peel back its layers could reach the deeper content. Like a staircase built into a cave wall, invisible at first but obvious once your eyes adjust, the message may have been designed to guide the right intelligence toward what lay inside it. And that makes the discovery feel less accidental and more deliberate. Once all the pieces are placed together, a darker possibility begins to dominate the story. The highly advanced object Voyager encountered may not have simply transmitted something toward the probe. It may have used the probe itself as part of the communication. That is a terrifying distinction because it means Voyager would not just be the witness to the event. It would be the mechanism through which the event reached us. Think of it like this. If Voyager sent out a signal into the darkness, the object may have used that signal the way a musician uses a string on an instrument, not creating a separate sound from scratch, but altering what was already there and sending it back transformed. That would explain why the final transmission carried both familiarity and foreignness at the same time. Part of it still looked like Voyager, but buried inside it was something else, something with an order the spacecraft could never produce on its own. That possibility is deeply disturbing because it suggests precision, intent, awareness. The object did not need to invade Earth, approach the solar system, or announce itself dramatically. It only needed to touch the right machine in the right place at the right time, and let humanity do the rest. In that sense, Voyager 1 may have been more than a probe drifting through space. It may have been the perfect carrier. What makes this whole story so chilling is the possibility that the message was never meant to be decoded immediately. It may have been meant to wait. That idea becomes hard to ignore when you consider how the transmission behaved under analysis. It remained unreadable to standard systems. It stayed buried beneath layers of apparent corruption. And only when Majorana 1, a quantum chip representing a newer stage of human computation, was applied to the data, did the deeper structure begin to emerge. That does not feel like coincidence. It feels like timing. And if that is true, then the implications are enormous. The message may not have been addressed to the scientists who first received it, or to the engineers who built Voyager, or even to the generation that launched it. It may have been addressed to a future version of humanity, one capable of building the tools required to understand it. That would mean the true recipient was never Voyager 1. The true recipient was us, decades later, once we became technologically mature enough to open what had been delivered. That thought alone is enough to reframe the entire event, because now the message is not just mysterious. It becomes selective, almost evaluative, less like an accident of contact, and more like a signal that remained closed until we reached the right threshold. And that raises an uncomfortable question. Was the transmission simply waiting to be decoded, or was it waiting to see whether we were ready? If that interpretation is even partially correct, then Voyager 1's legacy has just changed forever. It is no longer only the farthest human-made object in existence, no longer just a symbol of endurance and scientific ambition. It becomes something much bigger than that. It becomes the machine that may have brought home the first true hidden message from beyond the familiar limits of our world. That is why this story feels so historic. Not because the message is simply weird, and not because the decoding is technically impressive, but because of what it implies about our place in the cosmos. A probe launched in the 1970s may have crossed paths with a highly advanced object, received a structured transmission hidden inside apparent noise, and unknowingly carried that transmission all the way back to Earth, where it sat dormant until humanity built the exact kind of quantum system needed to unlock it. If that is true, then this is no longer just a story about Voyager's final transmission. It is a story about delayed contact, about a message that may have reached humanity long before humanity was capable of realizing it had arrived. For decades, Voyager 1 stood as one of humanity's greatest symbols of exploration. A machine built on Earth, pushed into the unknown, carrying our curiosity deeper into the darkness than anything else we have ever created. But now its final strange transmission may force us to see that mission in a completely different light. Because if Majorana 1 truly decoded a hidden message buried inside Voyager's signal, then the spacecraft did not simply send back broken data from the edge of interstellar space. It may have returned carrying the first real communication humanity has ever received from something beyond its own world. That is what makes this story feel so disturbing. The encounter with a highly advanced object, the signal that looked corrupted but behaved like design, the layered structure hidden inside the noise, the fact that the message only began to reveal itself under quantum analysis, and the possibility that Voyager itself was never the sender, only the vehicle. All of those pieces together create a picture that is hard to dismiss and even harder to live with. Because maybe the real fear is not that a message was hidden in Voyager 1's data. Maybe the real fear is that the message was hidden in exactly the way it needed to be, so we would only uncover it when we became advanced enough to understand the first part of what it was trying to say. So now the question is no longer whether Voyager 1's final transmission was strange. The question is this: if Majorana 1 opened the message, are we ready for what the next layer might reveal? If you enjoyed this video, leave your theory in the comments below. Do you think Majorana 1 really decoded a hidden message inside Voyager 1's final transmission? Or is this only the first stage of something much bigger? And subscribe, because if this signal is real, then what comes next could completely change the way we think about deep space, contact, and humanity's future among the stars.